Picture this. 5 young boys leave their homes on a spring morning to hunt for salamander eggs. They're laughing, excited for their adventure. By nightfall, they've vanished without a trace. No screams, no witnesses, no bodies, just gone. What comes next is one of the largest manhunts in South Korean history. 300,000 people searching. The president himself gets involved. The entire nation holds its breath, and for 11 years, there's nothing but silence. Until 2 men gathering acorns stumble upon something that will haunt an entire country. Something that's been hiding in plain sight all along. This is the story of the Frog Boys. And trust me, the truth is darker than you can imagine. March 26, 1991. Daegu, South Korea. The country is buzzing with excitement. Because this isn't just any Tuesday. This is history in the making. For the first time in 30 years, South Korea is holding democratic local elections. Schools are closed. Businesses shut their doors. It's a national holiday celebrating freedom after decades of military dictatorship. For 5 boys living in the Dalseo district, this day off means one thing: adventure. Their names were Woo Cheo-won, 13 years old, Jo Ho-yeon, 12, Kim Yong-gyu, 11, Park Chan-in, 10, and the youngest, Kim Jong-sik, just 9 years old. These weren't just friends. They were inseparable. The local adults called them the 5 Musketeers because you never saw one without the others. Around 9 in the morning, these boys told their parents they were heading to Mount Waryong to search for salamander eggs in the mountain streams. It was a common activity for kids in the area, a rite of spring. The mountain was only 2 kilometers from their homes, a place they knew like the backs of their hands. Actually, there were supposed to be 6 boys that morning. Kim Tae-ryong started out with them, but he got hungry and went back home for breakfast. That decision would save his life. The 5 boys were seen by neighbors heading toward the mountain, excited, carefree. The weather was cool, around 12 degrees Celsius, with some morning rain. But nothing these kids couldn't handle. They promised their parents they'd be home soon. But soon came and went. Evening arrived. Families set the dinner table, and 5 chairs remained empty. At first, parents weren't too worried. Boys being boys, they probably lost track of time. But as darkness fell and the temperature dropped to 3 degrees, panic set in. When midnight came and went with no sign of the children, their families reported them missing. And that's when everything changed. What happened next became the most extensive search operation in South Korean history. President Roh Tae-woo himself ordered a massive manhunt. 300,000 police officers, military personnel, and civilian volunteers flooded the area. This wasn't just a local story anymore. This was national news. The search efforts were broadcast live on television. The entire country was watching, hoping, praying. Mount Waryong was searched over 500 times. 500 times. They used helicopters, search dogs, digging equipment. They turned over every stone, combed through every bush, examined every crevice of that mountain. All 5 fathers quit their jobs to dedicate their lives to finding their sons. They walked the country, searching everywhere, following every lead, chasing every shadow of hope. But here's where it gets strange. The media, unfamiliar with salamanders, reported the boys had gone looking for frog eggs instead of salamander eggs. It was a small mistake, but it stuck. From that moment on, they became known as the Frog Boys. Their faces were everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Milk cartons, cigarette boxes, telephone cards, laundry detergent boxes, even candy wrappers. A reward of 42 million won was offered for any information. Their images became impossible to escape. Every Korean who lived through that era remembers those 5 faces staring back at them from supermarket shelves. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The media circus intensified. One TV show, The Square of Public Opinion, brought the fathers on to plead for help. The broadcast was live, and viewers could call in. But instead of sympathy, many callers mocked the grieving parents. The cameras caught every tear, every moment of anguish, broadcasting their pain across the nation for entertainment. Then the theory started flooding in. Had they run away? Impossible, said those who knew them. Had they fallen into a river and drowned? Search teams found no bodies. Had North Korean agents kidnapped them for some sinister purpose? It had happened before in the 70s. Some people even suggested UFO abductions. Yes, you heard that right. The speculation was endless, and none of it brought the boys home. 1 year passed. Then 2, then 3. The massive searches became less frequent. The media attention faded. The families went into debt from their search efforts. Slowly, painfully, the case began to fade from public consciousness. Most people assumed the worst. If the boys were alive, they would have been found by now. But the fathers never stopped searching, never stopped hoping, never stopped believing they'd find their sons. September 26, 2002. 11 years, 6 months, and 1 day after the boys disappeared. 2 men are on Mount Waryong gathering acorns. It's a quiet autumn morning. One of them is clearing away some leaves on the ground when he sees something that makes his blood run cold. A human skull. He keeps digging. More bones. Children's bones. 5 sets of remains huddled together, buried in a shallow grave beneath a pile of stones. Children's sneakers. Torn clothing. One boy's sweatshirt wrapped around his skull. Another's tracksuit pants tied in knots around his legs. The man, who remains anonymous to this day, immediately calls the police. By afternoon, the mountain is swarming with investigators, news vans, cameras. The media descends like locusts. The location, less than 4 kilometers from the boys' homes. In an area that had supposedly been searched over 500 times. How had everyone missed this? The police initially claimed the boys died from hypothermia. Case closed. A tragic accident. They got lost, the temperature dropped, they huddled together for warmth, and they died from exposure. But the families weren't buying it. Something was very wrong with this story. First, their sons knew this area intimately. Getting lost was virtually impossible. Second, if they had died from natural causes, why were they buried? Why were clothes tied in knots? Why was one boy's sweatshirt wrapped around his skull? The families demanded a proper forensic investigation. And what the forensic experts found changed everything. This was not hypothermia. This was murder. 3 of the 5 skulls showed evidence of severe blunt force trauma. Deep cracks, holes, L-shaped fractures. The kind of damage that comes from being struck repeatedly with a heavy object. Some skulls had strange markings, grooves that suggested a specific type of tool was used. But here's the most chilling detail. One of the skulls had 2 bullet holes in it. Bullet holes. In a child's skull. Near the bodies, investigators found rusted bullets and shell casing. They discovered a 5-centimeter-long loaded shell and 2 1-centimeter-long empty shells. The location was close to a military shooting range, though records show no practice sessions were scheduled that day because of the elections. Forensic experts examined the skull injuries closely. They sent the remains to American forensic specialists with better equipment. The conclusion was unanimous. These boys had been murdered. The injuries were from repeated blows to the head with a blunt object, possibly a metal farming tool or industrial implement. One forensic scientist noted that one skull had unusual X-shaped holes that were difficult to explain. Later investigations suggested the weapon might have been pruning shears, vernier caliper used for measuring objects, or some other specialized tool. Whatever it was, experts believed it was tied to the killer's profession. Here's something that will make your skin crawl. Moss was found growing inside some of the children's skulls. This proved the bodies hadn't been moved in years. They had been there since 1991. Through 500 searches, through armies of volunteers, police dogs, helicopters, and military personnel combing every inch of that mountain, they had been there all along. The investigation that followed the discovery was, to put it mildly, a disaster. When police arrived at the scene, they didn't use proper forensic protocols. They used pickaxes to dig through the area. Pickaxes. They contaminated the crime scene. Evidence was mishandled. According to reports, the bodies weren't even transported in proper body bags. They were placed in sacks. By the time proper forensic teams could examine everything, crucial evidence was already compromised. But let's talk about the theories, because what happened to these boys has haunted investigators for decades. Theory 1. The military accident. The bodies were found near military shooting range. What if one of the boys was accidentally shot during unauthorized target practice? To cover it up, the shooter would have to eliminate all witnesses, 4 other children. It's brutal, but it explains the bullet holes and the panic-driven burial. However, military records insist No one was using the range that day. Theory 2. Local perpetrators. Some investigators believe the boys encountered someone on the mountain who flew into a rage. Maybe they saw something they shouldn't have. Maybe they accidentally damaged property. The killer used whatever tool they had on hand, possibly a farming implement they were carrying. The grouped burial suggests panic and a hasty cover-up by someone who knew the area. Theory 3. Teenage delinquents. In 2022, an anonymous online post claimed to know what killed the boys: a vernier caliper. The post suggested local troublemakers who hung out on the mountain might have been involved. This theory gained enough traction that NBC's investigative journalism show PD Notepad dedicated an episode to it. The show noted that while young people did gather on the mountain, sometimes glue sniffing, having specialized measuring tools seemed unlikely. One witness even claimed to have seen a soldier in a red hat with an eagle emblem talking to the 5 boys that day. Theory 4. One that's almost too horrible to consider. There was a superstition in some areas that consuming a child's liver could cure leprosy. Could a group of desperate people have murdered the boys for this reason? It sounds medieval, but investigators couldn't rule it out. One particularly cruel twist came when a Korean CIA-connected criminal psychologist publicly suggested that one of the fathers was responsible. The theory went that the children knew their killer, which explained why they didn't run. But there was zero evidence pointing to any parent. The psychologist eventually lost his job over this reckless accusation. The most haunting question remains: how did one person control 5 boys? Investigators believe the killer shot one child first. When the other 4 rushed to help their friend, the killer attacked them with the blunt weapon. Another theory suggests they were ambushed, possibly by multiple attackers. What we know for certain is this: 5 children were murdered. Their bodies were deliberately buried, and someone got away with it. Here's perhaps the cruelest twist in this entire case. In 2006, 4 years after the bodies were discovered, the statute of limitations for murder in South Korea expired. Under the law at that time, prosecutors had 15 years from the date of the crime to bring charges. The boys were killed in 1991. The clock ran out in 2006. This meant that even if investigators identified the killer tomorrow, even if they had DNA evidence, even if someone confessed, they could not be prosecuted. The law protected them. Think about that. The family spent 15 years not knowing if their children were alive or dead. And when they finally got answers, they learned that justice would never be possible. The families fought back. They kept the case in the public eye. They advocated for legal reform. And in 2015, something unprecedented happened. South Korea abolished the statute of limitations for first-degree murder. This landmark change was driven largely by high-profile cold cases like the Frog Boys. It meant that murder cases could now be prosecuted no matter how much time had passed. The window for justice reopened. If the killer is ever found, they can finally be held accountable. On March 26, 2004, exactly 13 years after they disappeared, the boys' remains were cremated in a funeral ceremony. But their families kept the skulls. They preserved them as evidence, as proof, as silent witnesses that would one day speak the truth. In 2021, on the 30th anniversary of their disappearance, the city of Daegu installed a memorial near the site where the boys were found. It's called the Frog Boy Memorial and Children's Safety Prayer Monument. Police also announced a new task force to review the case from the beginning with fresh eyes. The case has inspired 2 films, multiple documentaries, books, songs, and countless true crime analyses. In 2019, Channel News Asia produced an investigative documentary series called In Search of the Frog Boys that re-examined every piece of evidence. Over the years, police have followed more than 500 leads, anonymous tips, false confessions, reported sightings. Every thread has been pulled, and every thread has led nowhere. So what really happened on Mount Waryong on March 26, 1991? The truth is, we still don't know. And that might be the most terrifying part of this story. 5 children went up a mountain on a spring morning. They knew the area. They were together. They were just looking for salamander eggs. And somehow, someone murdered all 5 of them, buried their bodies, and vanished into the crowd of 300,000 people searching for them. The killer could have been in the search parties. They could have been one of the volunteers combing through the forest. They could have stood next to grieving parents and helped hand out flyers with the boys' faces on them. They walked free for 11 years, while those small bodies lay hidden on the mountain. And they're still walking free today. The Frog Boys case exposed critical flaws in how South Korea handled missing children cases. It led to massive reforms in child safety protocols. It changed laws around statute of limitations. It transformed how law enforcement approaches cold cases. Those 5 boys in death probably saved countless other children through the changes their case inspired. But none of that brings them back. Woo Cheol-won would be 46 years old today. Jo Ho-yeon would be 45. Kim Yong-gyu, 44. Park Chan-in, 43. Kim Jong-sik would be 42. Instead, they remain forever 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Frozen in time. 5 faces on faded missing posters that South Korea can never forget. Their families still wait for answers. Their case file remains open. And somewhere out there, someone knows exactly what happened on that mountain. If you're watching this from South Korea, if you know anything about this case, if you heard something strange in 1991 or saw something that never quite added up, the Daegu police are still accepting tips. The task force is still working. Because justice may be delayed, but with the new laws in place, it can no longer be denied. The Frog Boys deserve that much. And so do the families who have spent over 30 years searching for the truth. Rest in peace, Woo Cheol-won, Jo Ho-yeon, Kim Yong-gyu, Park Chan-in, and Kim Jong-sik. The world has not forgotten you.